that has variations on it. It goes back to our talk about copying things.
It's something I was thinking about the other day. I mean, I love Wikipedia, and Wikipedia is so huge, right?
Yeah,
enormous. But there's, when I was younger, we still had your old-fashioned encyclopedias where things were organized alphabetically, and we talked about cognitive dissonance. What you have, if you go to pick up a volume that's of things in the world arranged alphabetically, you come across things that are like,
you're like, what's that word? Yeah,
I'm like, what is that? And what is, and that's discovery that I feel like it's harder for us to make those discoveries now.
Yeah, it's true. Because,
we're intended to kind of know what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, so I had to, as one of my last classes in graduate school, explain 2 essays by Heidegger. Really one of the more challenging things that I've ever done. And we've already talked about how I feel very at home in the written word and language and concepts expressed that way. But Heidegger's challenging. Right. And it was maybe a 25-page essay, The Question Concerning Technology, written in the 40s. And he basically, I think, and it could be that it could be. I'm definitely interpreting our current culture, my understanding of the world around me as I'm reading Heidegger from the 1940s. And basically his idea of inframing is that, you could think of inframing as the bounds of the picture plane of the computer screen. Right. Is that we think of it as the search bar on the Google splash page. Right. Is that inframing there, I go to Google and I type in what I'm looking for, and everything else is a blank white splash page around it. And so there's a narrowing, there's a specificity with inframing that Heidegger explains in so much more complex philosophical terms than I'm capable of even restating now. But that technology necessitates. So the best that I think it's probably been broken down in a colloquialism is, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So so that there is a danger and a narrowing of thought, or there are different approaches to problem solving that if you ever take a class in management that they talk about, which there are cognitive distortions of how you see a problem, right? So there's a commitment problem of you define the problem this way. And so that's kind of if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, that you get tunnel vision. Right. And that sometimes just shifting your vision a bit and you can understand, you can sort of see it's like stepping back, as a painter, you understand it is not good to work for 9 hours up close to a painting. Right. And maybe that's part of your process. I know, some people, the whole idea is the distortion of working up close, and then, you have this master image and it's all really messed up. But if you don't take in the whole, the gestalt, you can get really off course. And I think, the challenges with Facebook, the challenges that some of these things for privacy, for democracy are creating is we've been real up close and enjoying ourselves quite a lot inside this realm, but we haven't stepped back to take in the gestalt of the whole picture of what these are, and we're being served up a hefty dose of step back right now, and I think that's a healthy thing. I think that's a good thing, and forward progress is being made. it's not always pleasant or easy, but, sometimes, like I said, the process of painting is very forgiving. You just start over, right? You just return again to the studio, pick up the brushes again, keep putting one foot in front of the other, because, I think as a female artist, it's always great because you're like, oh, women get their museum shows in their 70s, and I've got this much time till then to get my act together.
Hopefully, it's a catch-up. The standard, you're right. Yeah. So hopefully the standard still isn't the 70s. Let's hope that
Laura Owens is right down the street, and she's close to my age. So, so it is different, and the pipeline is different. But complacency, 8 years of Obama lulled a lot of people into complacency. And whether, people weren't paying close attention, people were not paying close attention.
Right.
And so now they are.
Right.
So that's a good thing, but hopefully it doesn't people get exhausted and wear themselves out. It's like I said, you do kind of have to think about it as a marathon, not a sprint. And
No, I know, and this kind of folds into where I was going to go next, which was, you didn't get an art degree. You got an undergraduate degree in government and a master's in public administration, right? Mm-hmm. I have a business degree and an MBA, and so my graduate degree is in capitalism, right?
Yeah.
And so,
well, mine too. Public administration. Right? And so, is the other side of that.
Something I've been kind of, over the past decade is all of the theories that I learned that should work are around, from an economic perspective is, if you encourage business growth, if you encourage big business, then it will all trickle down, right? If a company is profitable, then they will hire more people, and more people will have jobs, and there will be more prosperity, better salaries,
and
better
benefits.
And healthcare
takes care of itself because everybody's on the payroll and they've got a plan.
And so, but now, we I'm beginning to see the practicality that, the more profitable a business becomes, the more greedy a business becomes, and the more profitable it wants to become. And it
becomes a treadmill.
Yeah. And they're more inclined to become more profitable through automation, which means that, there's fewer workforce, hey, let's find, let's contribute less to the healthcare or the IRA, and so it's it really I'm constantly having to question everything that's life.
It's the utopian thing that you have to be skeptical of.
At the same time, I see the realities of living in France is not any better. It's purely socialized. Yeah. Oh, wow, free healthcare, but 73% income tax. I don't want a 73% income tax either. But it's and so.
Well, but if you,
I don't want this to become overly political, but it's just we're at a point in where we're all questioning everything we know.
We're questioning structures, and I think that's a healthy thing. And it's not just artists who are doing it now. Right. It's everybody. But I think what you were saying is the 73% income tax, I want to come back to that because if you take into account what you're paying for healthcare and what you're paying for college and what you're paying, for a lot of the other things, is if you're not paying that, but then you're paying 70. It's just shifting it. And what the idea is that they've said collectively we want to decide together. And in France, what they have is the problem of in-migration and cultural, influence that is basically, this looks great, everybody wants to go there, and it's taxing the system beyond what it can handle. Right. And then also changing the culture that said we want to do this, and from immigration. So people are coming in and saying, this is great, we want this. But at the same time, that's destabilizing it.
And the other thing that's destabilizing in France is that for decades, native French people have not been having kids.
Yeah.
But people keep on immigrating, and those immigrants
are
having lots of kids.
Yeah.
And so the demographics, are, and even Germany, Germany is in the same boat, and Germany has all sorts of incentives now
to procreate. Yes.
Yeah. So like,
and it's coming to America. I mean, that's true.
They have incentives. They have incentives for like, for people, for like Western people to immigrate to Germany to try to offset their changing demographic, because the folks in Western Europe are scared about a shift in power structures if they're democracies and all of a sudden the old order is in a minority. How does their country wind up looking totally different?
Stipends for people having kids or even artists. Like, I was incredibly naive before I had my son, that I was just going to like bring him to the studio and like set him in a corner and just go on about my work. And the tanking of productivity that having a small child does, that you have to work harder than everybody else, Herculean effort just to sort of barely keep pace. And, and that's not without its costs. I know, and my husband, he works for KERA, and, like, he has a demanding job. And so he, thinks about like what he's missing out on being with Saul. And so I'm thinking from the reverse perspective of like, he gets to go to an office and just focus for 8 hours a day.
No, but I was thinking about that earlier when you were talking about, having the podcasts and, different videos going to try to, I guess, turn on a focused, cerebral sort of mindset.
That flow state, kind of.
Right, which is, when, your son's young, right?
Mm-hmm. Like, he's almost 2,
Right. So at that point, there's just this general sense of exhaustion, but, there's, it's just hard to maintain this whole, high intellectual, cerebral, attitude,
when you're the caretaker, right? Or there's constant distraction. And it's not just like look at this on the internet kind of distraction. Right. It's like, it's serious. Like, and so it's different. And I think, I don't think that there's, the bigness of the United States, the bigness of the countries in Europe or, anywhere. I don't think that solutions can be done at that scale. And I think that's part of where we're heading in terms of, creating these small cultures, that we can help each other and find solutions that do work.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, and maybe it's because have a master's in public administration. But I had where was I think it was on one of these Freakonomics podcasts. They were talking about how probably the highest likelihood of there being significant change domestically is at the community level, and that at the end of the day, the most powerful agents for change are going to be mayors, because they can regardless of what national policy is, that they can enact local level policy that can make a significant impact. And they know how to make it work. Right.
Like they do have line item vetoes, and they can broker deals. And honestly, a lot of it is because, and I don't know across the I do know because New York, they're partisan, but here local elections, for the most part, you don't have to declare. Right. We're out of the party system. And so you can broker deals with District 3, 4, whatever. Right. And so taking a little bit of the ideology out of it. Well, and I say that I worked in municipal government, and there are a lot of what I feel like are sociopaths who are going into public service at the local level to try to build a career for national platform, campaigns, and they see it as their path to stardom. I mean, when